Hi everyone, my name is Wason. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Forest Resources at the University of Maine, and in this short video I'm going to give you an introduction to what trees do as they approach the fall season, what they do to survive through the winter, and what they do in the coming spring. So let's start with what trees do in the fall. There's several environmental cues that trees are trying to read. One of the most important ones that trees read are the coming of shorter days in the fall. As Yogi Berra once said, it gets early late around here, and that's what we tend to be saying this time of year in the fall in Maine. And trees can sense this with molecules called phytochromes. So phytochromes are these small molecules that change their shape based on how much light they're receiving. And the plants can detect how much light they're receiving by measuring basically the concentration of different types of phytochromes in their cells. The second thing that plants sense in the fall is temperature. So we all know as temperatures get cooler in the fall, plants get ready to shed their leaves. And the reason that plants need to measure these clues is because they need to do what we call resorbing nutrients from their leaves. So think about the leaves that fall in the wintertime. The leaves, as they fall, they tend to actually be a brown color. And part of that is because the leaves have actually had most of the nutrients pulled out of them and back into the main stem of the plant. About 50% of the nutrients in a leaf are pulled back into the plant before they're dropped. So it's really important for plants in order to read the environmental cues so that those leaves are not damaged or ripped off the tree before they can resorb those critical nutrients. So timing of leaf drop is really important in the fall, but plants also need to get ready to survive winter and the very cold temperatures. And so they go through a process of cold hardening. Cold hardening involves several different things, but it includes the production of antifreeze compounds in cells, which lowers the freezing point. There's other structural changes in cells that adjust the format of their membranes and the organization of different organelles in the cells. And plants also prepare for supercooling, which is basically allowing the plant to get to very, very cold temperatures without actually the formation of ice. All of this is really important as the plants move towards the next time of year, winter. So we'll switch to talking about winter here. One of the most important things about winter is cold hardiness. And so around Maine, we know about cold winters here, and plants are no exception. Let's not forget that plants are alive. Plants need to survive this winter in order to take advantage of the good conditions that are coming the next year. So typically plants are just trying to survive and get through the winter conditions. But let's remember that what's really important for trees is carbon. So in the summertime, plants fix carbon through a process of photosynthesis. So they take carbon dioxide from the air and they turn it into sugars. In the process, they also release oxygen, and that's a major benefit for us. But those stored sugars then are things that the plant uses all winter long to stay alive. And so there's actually a depletion in carbon reserves over the winter. And that's one of the things that climate change impacts for trees. In actually warmer winters, the reactions of these inside these trees actually increase in their rate, and plants can actually burn more carbon in warmer winters, which seems a little bit paradoxical in some ways. The other major effect of winters on trees is actually in their roots. We don't often think about the root systems because they're not easy to see, but roots are not cold hardy, so they don't go through those same types of adaptations that above ground portions of the plant go through with the antifreeze compounds and structural changes and supercooling and preparing for supercooling of the water in cells. Roots are actually damaged at relatively modest temperatures, so anything just below about freezing you can have root damage. And so this is when the roots are actually killed by the ice crystals that form inside the cells, and it damages those roots. One of the things that's really important for survival of roots in the wintertime is the snowpack. And so this provides an insulating layer that prevents those roots from experiencing very, very cold temperatures. And that's one of the major implications of climate change on winter trees. It's going to change the dynamics of trees that can survive damage to their root systems when there's no snowpack. And the other important thing that happens in wintertime is surviving these very, very cold temperatures from those adaptations for cold hardiness. But that cold hardiness is acquired by the plants, and they actually will they'll start out not be very cold hardy, and then throughout the winter they'll become very, very cold hardy and can survive cold temperatures. But then in the spring they'll emerge from that cold hardiness again. And so that moves us now to our spring season and what plants are doing in the springtime. Remember, the whole purpose of spring is really to get ready for summer, and so plants want to leaf out. We need to get those leaves out there so that they can begin fixing carbon. And so that increases the carbon that they're able to fix. So now they're building up their sugar reserves again. One of the interesting things about this, though, is that leaves are very expensive. And so they actually have to spend carbon before those leaves, they have to spend carbon to build those leaves before those leaves can start acting as a carbon source through the process of photosynthesis. So if you've ever heard the term, you've got to spend money to make money, it's never more apparent than to a tree in the springtime. This is also why trees can only handle certain numbers of defoliation events. So late spring frosts can be especially damaging for trees that still have young and delicate emerging leaves. If the plant spends a bunch of money to put out its first set of leaves, and then a late spring frost comes through and kills all those leaves, now all of the carbon that the plant invested in, and the other nutrients as well, in producing those leaves is essentially wasted, and the plant needs to start again. And so it's slowly depleting carbon reserves if we have these events. And all of those things can weaken the tree as it gets ready to survive another growing season as well. So it's really important that a tree times this right in the spring, and there's several environmental cues that they use. In the springtime, they use something called winter chilling requirements. And all this means is that the plant has to sense that it survived winter, that it went through relatively cold conditions. So if it doesn't go through a cold condition, then it doesn't really detect that it's made it through winter yet, so it will resist leafing out, or bursting bud in the spring, as we call it. The other thing they'll detect is the warming in the spring, so they do detect warmer temperatures in the spring. And they will also detect photoperiod again in the spring as well. So they'll be detecting that those days are getting longer again. And all of those clues together signal to the plant that it's time to begin leafing out. The other thing plants are doing in the spring is root growth. And so those roots now are growing much longer and spreading out to try to take advantage of nutrients and water that are available in different parts of the soil. And all of that is to get ready for the summertime, when the plant really needs to crank away and conduct lots of photosynthesis in order to be competitive and invest in other things like growth and reproduction. And so that's a brief review of everything a plant goes through as it starts in the fall, detecting environmental cues, resorbing nutrients as it prepares to drop its leaves, and cold hardening in preparation for winter when it needs to survive. It's going to burn some carbon surviving that winter. We talked about snowpack and root freezing and root mortality, and all of that to then get ready for the spring, where it needs to time things very carefully so that it leaves out early enough that it can begin photosynthesizing and producing sugars by photosynthesis, but not so early that a late spring frost maybe would damage those new young delicate leaves.